On the operating table, her body temperature was lowered to a chilling 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Her heart was stopped. Her brain waves went completely flat. For all clinical purposes, Pam Reynolds was dead. Yet, it was in this state of absolute biological stillness that her consciousness became more alive than ever. From a position above her own body, she watched the procedure. She heard the surgical team talking about her veins being too small. She saw the peculiar instrument they used, a tool that looked, in her own words, like an electric toothbrush. She heard the distinct sound of a saw cutting into her own skull. This is not a story told under hypnosis, or a dream recalled years later. This is a documented account, verified by the very medical team that conducted the operation, an account of precise, factual observation that should have been impossible. Because the data is clear, when her brain was offline, her consciousness was online. This case doesn't just suggest that we are more than our brains, it presents the evidence on a clinical platter, and it forces us to ask the most profound question imaginable. If consciousness is not in the brain, then where is it? And what part of us is it that truly sees? The power of this evidence does not rest on the shoulders of a mystic or a spiritual guru. It rests on the shoulders of an ordinary woman from Atlanta, a singer and songwriter with no prior interest in paranormal phenomena. Pam Reynolds was not seeking a transcendental experience. She was fighting for her life against a giant brain aneurysm. Her account is not a narrative shaped by belief, but a testimony forged in the crucible of a medical emergency. And her testimony would have likely remained a personal anecdote, dismissed by the world, were it not for the methodical work of Dr. Michael Sabom. Dr. Sabom was not a believer looking for proof. He was a cardiologist and professor at the Emory University School of Medicine, a researcher trained in the rigors of scientific skepticism. He had heard tales of near-death experiences before, and like many of his colleagues, he suspected they were little more than hallucinations produced by a brain starved of oxygen. But he was also a true investigator. He decided to apply scientific discipline to these claims, interviewing dozens of patients. And it was in the case of Pam Reynolds that he found a signal so clear it could not be dismissed as noise. He found a testimony that perfectly matched the detailed surgical reports, a correlation so precise that it challenged the very foundations of his medical training. He was the skeptic who followed the evidence, right past the edge of what science thought was possible. In the world of clinical medicine, consciousness is treated as a closed system. It begins when the brain's complex wiring sparks to life, and it ends when that wiring fails. Any reported experience outside of these boundaries is typically filed away under convenient, yet unexamined labels. Chemical flashes in a dying brain, anesthesia-induced dreams, or the reconstruction of false memories. This was the world Dr. Sabom inhabited. He wasn't merely a skeptic. He was a practitioner of a discipline that demanded material proof. When he began his investigation, he was not trying to prove the existence of an afterlife. He was attempting to document a psychological phenomenon, to understand the tricks a brain might play on itself at the edge of oblivion. He approached each testimony not as a confidant, but as a clinical examiner. He was searching for the inconsistencies, the vague descriptions, the telltale signs of a dream masquerading as a memory. He was a cartographer of the physical heart, suddenly tasked with verifying a map of a land that, according to all known laws, should not exist. Pam Reynolds, then, was not just another patient. She was the anomaly in the dataset, a voice from a place of total neurological silence, reporting back with the precision of a trained observer. The collision of her impossible experience with Dr. Sabom's rigorous, evidence-based methodology created the perfect storm, transforming what could have been dismissed as a fascinating story into a watertight case that could be presented before the court of scientific inquiry. As the anesthetic took hold, Pam's last sensation was a gentle fading, then a distinct pop. It was a subtle, almost playful sound. Suddenly, her awareness was no longer inside her head, but floating above the operating table, looking down at her own vacant form. Her senses were not diminished. They were hyper-acute. She could see the flurry of activity with a clarity that defied the physical eye. She heard a female surgeon remark that her veins and arteries were too small for the bypass machine. She watched as a male surgeon brought out the cranial saw. The sound was not what she expected. It was a high-pitched whine like a dentist's drill. The instrument itself was peculiar, stored in a case that resembled a toolbox. She would later describe it, with stunning accuracy, as looking like an electric toothbrush. This was the verifiable evidence, the data points that Dr. Sabom would later cross-reference with the surgical records, finding a perfect, inexplicable match. But her journey was only beginning. Her awareness was then pulled away from the room, drawn down a swirling vortex, a tunnel of energy, towards a brilliant point of light. As she approached, the light expanded, enveloping her not in heat, but in a profound sense of unconditional love. It was, she said, the most alive she had ever felt. Within this light, figures began to emerge. Her deceased grandmother, an uncle, old friends. They were not ghosts, but beings of pure light, radiating peace and familiarity. They were there to greet her. She was given to understand that time, as we perceive it, does not exist in this realm. Everything happens at once. There was no past to regret, no future to fear. There was only a perfect, eternal now. She was shown that the universe is not a cold, random machine, but a creation born from a source of absolute love. And then, a message was conveyed without words. It was not yet her time. Her journey was not over. As her uncle guided her back towards the tunnel, she resisted, but was gently returned, plunging back into her body with the visceral shock of diving into a pool of ice. It's crucial to understand the nature of this out-of-body perception. It was not like seeing with eyes or hearing with ears. It was a form of direct, unfiltered knowing. Consciousness itself was the sense organ. There was no delay, no interpretation. The thought, "What is that sound?" and the complete understanding of the saw's function, its design, and its purpose happened simultaneously. This was not memory. It was a state of omniscient observation within that specific, limited context. When she was pulled into the vortex, this knowing expanded exponentially. The light she approached was not like the light from our sun, which travels through space and illuminates objects. This light was the space. It was the illumination. And it was also the intelligence that perceived it. She described it as a knowing so profound that it made all human knowledge seem like a child's whisper. The beings she met were not hazy apparitions. They were distinct, individual points of this same loving, intelligent light. They communicated not through words, which are symbols of things, but through a direct transmission of thought, feeling, and understanding. It was a communication of pure essence to pure essence. In their presence, she understood her own life not as a linear sequence of events, but as a single intricate tapestry. Every thread, every choice, every moment of pain and joy was part of a perfect, meaningful pattern. She wasn't shown a review of her life, but she understood the very reason for it. She understood that every soul is on a mission of learning and growth, and that her mission was, as of that moment, incomplete. The return was not a punishment, but a necessary fulfillment of a cosmic contract she herself had agreed to. The pain of returning to her body was the pain of a limitless consciousness being once again poured into a finite vessel. If what Pam Reynolds experienced is true, then the foundational assumption of modern neuroscience is not just wrong, it is completely inverted. We have been taught to believe that the brain is a generator, that this 3-pound organ of flesh and electricity somehow creates the entire universe of our subjective experience. Our thoughts, our love, our memories, our very sense of self. But Pam's testimony presents a radical alternative. What if the brain is not the generator but the receiver? What if it's a biological antenna, a sophisticated filter designed to tune the infinite signal of cosmic consciousness down into the narrow bandwidth of human survival? Imagine a television set. It receives a broadcast, translates it and displays it on a screen. If you damage the television, the picture distorts or disappears, but you haven't destroyed the broadcast. The signal is still there, filling the air. You've only broken the instrument designed to perceive it. This single idea changes everything we thought we knew about life and death. Death, in this model, is not the end of consciousness. It is the end of the filter. It is the moment the antenna breaks, and our awareness is no longer limited to the local broadcast, but is released back into the full, unfiltered signal of reality itself. This isn't a new, radical idea. It is perhaps the oldest idea in human philosophy. Over 2,000 years ago, the philosopher Plato proposed his famous allegory of the cave. He described humanity as prisoners, chained in a dark cave, forced to watch shadows flicker on a wall. We mistake these shadows for the whole of reality. But, Plato argued, true reality exists outside the cave, in a world of brilliant light. The philosopher's journey, and indeed the soul's journey, is to break the chains, leave the cave of physical perception, and witness the true source of all things. Is it possible that Pam Reynolds did not have a near-death experience, but a brief and profound journey out of Plato's cave? In his interviews with Pam, Dr. Sabom meticulously documented every verifiable detail: the shape of the saw, the words of the surgeons, the sequence of events. But when the inquiry turned to the nature of the ultimate reality she encountered, the clinical precision of her testimony gave way to the limitations of human language. She was asked to describe the ultimate source, the brilliant point of light from which everything emanated. She paused. The transcript notes a profound shift in her demeanor. She was no longer just recalling an event. She was trying to translate an experience that was fundamentally untranslatable. She explained that the light was not just a visual phenomenon, it was an entity, and yet it was not separate from her. It was God, but it was also what she was made of. It was a knowledge so complete and a love so absolute that our words for knowledge and love are mere shadows of the reality. When pressed to define it further, she simply could not. She stated that there are aspects of that reality that we are not meant to bring back into this one. It's as if a part of the knowing is sealed off upon re-entry into the physical body, a knowledge so profound that our biology, our very language, collapses when it tries to contain it. She was shown, but she could not fully speak it. The map is not the territory, and her memory was the map. The territory itself, the source of all existence, remains a sacred, inviolable mystery, a truth that can only be experienced, never merely described. This limit is not a failure of Pam's memory or vocabulary. It is a feature of the boundary between dimensions. Imagine trying to explain the concept of color to a person born in a world of only black and white. You can use metaphors. Red is like the sound of a trumpet. Blue is like the feeling of cool water. But you can never truly convey the direct experience, the qualia, of color itself. The description will always be a pale, distorted echo of the reality. Pam's struggle was infinitely more profound. She was trying to describe a state of being where the observer and the observed are one, where knowledge is not learned but remembered, where love is not an emotion you feel for something else, but the very fabric of existence you are woven from. In that realm, dichotomies cease to exist. There is no here and there, no before and after, no self and other. How does one describe a state of perfect unity using a language built entirely on separation and duality? Her silence, her inability to articulate the final nature of the source, is perhaps the most powerful piece of evidence she brought back. It suggests that the journey of consciousness is not just about seeing new things, but about becoming a new kind of perceiver. To fully comprehend that reality would require a consciousness no longer bound by a human brain. To bring that total knowledge back would be like trying to pour the entire ocean into a single cup. The cup, our linguistic and cognitive structure, would not just overflow, it would shatter. The final truth, it seems, is protected. It can be glimpsed, it can be felt, but it cannot be possessed or weaponized by the limited ego. It remains a mystery not to frustrate us, but perhaps to continually call us forward. In the face of such extraordinary evidence, the response from the scientific mainstream was predictable, yet revealing. The case was too well documented to be ignored, so it had to be explained away. The primary counterargument proposed was anesthesia awareness. This theory suggests that Pam's brain was not fully offline, that some hidden pockets of neurological activity remained, allowing her to register snippets of sound from the operating room. These snippets, the theory goes, were later woven by her brain into a complex, dreamlike narrative, but this explanation collapses under the weight of the facts. First, the very nature of her surgery, the Operation Standstill, was designed to create a total absence of brain activity. Her electroencephalogram, or EEG, was flat. There was no measurable electrical activity in her cerebral cortex. If consciousness is brain activity, then there was nothing to be conscious with. Second, her body temperature was lowered to 60 degrees. This extreme hypothermia effectively shuts down higher brain function, including the mechanisms responsible for forming and storing long-term memories. Even if she had heard something, her brain was in no condition to record it. And most critically, the theory fails to explain the most crucial detail, her perspective. Pam did not just hear conversations. She saw the operation from a specific vantage point outside and above her own body. She accurately described the M8 cranial saw and its unique sound before it was used on her skull, a detail Dr. Sabam confirmed was impossible for her to have known or seen beforehand. The attempts to reduce her experience to a known neurological glitch are not a true scientific engagement with the data. They are an act of faith, a faith in a purely materialist paradigm, so rigid that any evidence to the contrary must be forced to fit the model, no matter how illogical the explanation becomes. The case of Pam Reynolds reveals a fundamental truth. Sometimes it is the skeptic, not the witness, who is unwilling to look at all the evidence. The dismissal of Pam's experience is not just a disagreement over data, it is a clash of worldviews. The materialist paradigm is not just a scientific model, it is the default philosophy of our age. It has built our modern world, and its core tenet is simple. All phenomena are, at their root, the result of matter interacting according to fixed laws. Consciousness, in this view, is an emergent property of complex biological matter, an intricate illusion produced by the firing of neurons. This model is incredibly powerful for explaining the physical world, but the case of Pam Reynolds is a direct assault on its central premise. It presents a scenario where, with the machinery of the brain turned off, the illusion of consciousness not only persisted, but became clearer, more coherent and capable of perceptions far beyond the body's physical senses. To explain this away, the paradigm must perform increasingly desperate intellectual gymnastics. It must invent hypothetical, undetectable forms of residual brain activity. It must propose that a brain in deep hypothermia, with no electrical signals, can somehow construct a vivid, linear, and factually accurate narrative. It must ignore the witness's own testimony about the quality of the experience, its hyper-reality, and insist, against the evidence, that it must have been a dream. This is not the scientific method. The scientific method demands that when evidence consistently contradicts a theory, the theory must be revised or discarded. But when a theory becomes a deeply held worldview, it is no longer treated as a tool, it is treated as a truth to be defended at all costs. The case of Pam Reynolds, therefore, does more than challenge a scientific explanation. It holds up a mirror to the scientific establishment, asking a difficult question. Are you truly following the evidence wherever it leads? Or are you only willing to look at evidence that confirms what you have already decided is true? The evidence presented in the case of Pam Reynolds does not offer us a neat and tidy answer. It offers us something far more valuable, a profound and unavoidable question. It tears a hole in the fabric of our ordinary reality and invites us to look through. To hear this account is to be presented with a choice. We can attempt to patch the hole, to dismiss the evidence, and to return to the comfortable certainty that we are merely biological machines destined for oblivion. Or we can embrace the implications of what she saw. We can accept that the greatest mystery of the universe is not in the distant stars, but within ourselves. This is not about adopting a new belief. It is about adopting a new mode of inquiry, their willingness to consider that we are not our bodies, but immortal consciousness having a temporary human experience. This single idea, if taken seriously, has the power to dismantle our deepest fears about death, loss, and meaninglessness. It reframes our entire lives not as a frantic race towards an ending, but as a purposeful chapter in an eternal journey of learning. If this investigation resonates with the questions you've been asking, subscribe to continue the great exploration. This concludes our inquiry for now, a synthesis of documented evidence and timeless philosophical questions grounded in the sources that guide our journey. What echo did this story awaken in you?